Hello everyone, this is Direwolf20 and welcome to a updated, brand new, I don't know, mod spotlight on Applied Energistics 2. So Applied Energistics 2 is kind of a complete rewrite of Applied Energistics. There's some stuff that's not completely implemented just yet, but it's currently available for Minecraft 1.7. You can go ahead and download it and start testing it and playing around. I guess it's considered a beta still, but there's a lot of things that are different and changed. There's a lot of new mechanics, and there's some really cool stuff. I think you guys are really going to enjoy starting to play with it. The early game has changed a bit. Some of the mechanics have changed a bit. So instead of treating this like a mod update where I talk about what's changed, I'm going to treat this kind of like a brand new mod because that's kind of what it is. So I'm going to treat this mod spotlight as if you guys have never seen Applied Energistics before. Some functionality is similar to Applied Energistics 1. Others are pretty different. So we're going to kind of cover this thing start to finish. So let's get started looking at Applied Energistics and see what's new, what's changed, and all the cool stuff to check out. I'm going to build a brand new AE network somewhere over here-ish, just so you guys can get a feel for how this thing works start to finish. Alright guys, so the first thing of course to talk to you guys about are world gen. So there's basically two types of world gen now, Certus quartz and charged Certus quartz. So we can see here that we have a basic Certus quartz, which is pretty similar to what we're used to. We get a Certus quartz crystal from that. And charged Certus quartz, we can get charged Certus quartz crystals. So one thing you might have noticed from that is we didn't get any dust, we only got the Certus quartz. So you do have to grind it now. There is no more dust from the world gen. Another type of world gen, however, is a little bit different. These are meteorites that have crashed to Earth from outer space. And we can find one pretty easily by crafting ourselves a meteorite compass, which is simply some iron with some of that charged Certus quartz crystal in the center. So not too hard to make. So you just want to find the meteorite, and you can see here that just following this compass should lead us to it. And when it starts spinning crazy like that, it means you're pretty much right on top of it. Now, these meteorites can either spawn above ground or below ground. So sometimes you'll find them up above ground, other times below ground. Like I said, when it's spinning like this, you're pretty much there. So let's go find it deep underground, shall we? Alright guys, so the main thing to note about this little compass here is that it's only accurate within the chunk. So it points to a chunk with some skystone in it, but it won't point directly to the skystone itself. So notice that as soon as I cross this chunk boundary here, it is starting to spin. So somewhere within this chunk is the skystone. So I've actually dug down pretty far a couple times within this chunk and did not have any luck finding it, but finally I did. So keep that in mind. You're not going to get pointed directly at it, you'll get pointed to the chunk where it's at. So down here we've got some skystone. So let's take a look at this stuff. Oh, nifty, skystone. What can we do with it? You can actually make chests out of it, which is pretty cool, and you can smelt it into skystone blocks, which can be used to make other chests, and you can also use it for the ME controller, which we'll get to in just a little bit. And then you can also do some, nifty crafting with skystone bricks and small bricks and all kinds of that stuff, so you can kind of cycle through the different types of, decorative material you can make with it. So let's dig through here and see if there's anything else deep within the skystone. Now you guys can see that this meteorite is really huge. Like the amount of skystone in here is ridiculous. I've actually been in creative mode breaking this out because in the exact center of this thing, which you can kind of find because these are perfect spheres, so if you figure it out, you can find a good way to track down the exact center pretty easily, you'll find this guy, which is actually really a little tricky to find because he looks exactly like the blocks around it, and there's no open chamber around it. He's completely surrounded by skystone block. This is the skystone chest, which inside you will find some engineering presses. Okay, there's several types of different presses, and I'm going to get into what they're all about in a little bit here, but as far as I know, this is the only place to find them. You cannot get these through crafting. So that about covers the world gen section. Let's move on to some of the machines. Alright guys, let's talk about some of the basic machines that you're going to need to know about. The first one here is the grindstone and the wooden crank. This is how you're going to be able to grind not only just ores, but other stuff like Certus quartz crystal in here. So you can't grind charged Certus quartz, but you can grind regular Certus quartz. Just hold right click on the wooden crank. Those of you familiar with Applied Energistics 1 probably know about this block. It's pretty similar to the way it worked before. And you'll notice that you get some Certus quartz dust. Cool. So one Certus quartz dust per Certus quartz crystal. Now, there is an interesting mechanic that you can use here to actually double your output. If you're running low on Certus quartz, as you typically do, there's a neat way to go ahead and change that up. So let's get ourselves a bucket of water. Dun, 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 dun. Cool. What you can do is place a piece of sand in your crafting table with your Certus quartz dust, and you'll note that you get 2 Certus quartz seeds per dust. So you can use these to actually grow a full Certus quartz crystal once again. Let's see how. All you have to do is drop your Certus quartz seeds directly into a pool of water, and they'll just sit there. Don't worry, unlike most entities that are dropped on the ground, Certus quartz seeds in water will not disappear after a little bit of time. So you can go ahead and leave them there, and you'll note these little particle effects that appear to be showing up in there, indicating that this Certus quartz is actually growing. Now, if we went in here and picked it up again, we'd note that it does get stacked with this guy, so it hasn't made any progress. But if we leave it alone for a little while, we should come back and see that it's got a percentage of growth on there. So I'm going to go ahead and drop all 4 of them in there. It doesn't matter. You can drop as many in there as you want at a time. There's no limit. So it's pretty nifty. I'll come back in a little bit to see the progress. And also, while it does take a really long time to do, there is a process that we can do to speed this up, which we'll have to get into in just a little bit. So let's let those cook for a while, and we'll come back to check on them shortly. The next machine you're going to want to know about is probably one of the most early machines you're going to build. That's the vibration chamber. This is basically the power generation device of Applied Energistics 2. It can burn any combustible material like wood and coal and all that stuff, anything you can throw in a vanilla furnace. And you'll note here that it produces some AE power, AE per tick. And once it's built up its own little internal buffer, it drops down and starts conserving power, only generating a small amount and using less fuel, which is pretty smart. But we're going to want to store that power somewhere, and for that we've got the energy cell, not too hard to make, a little bit of that Certus quartz crystal, and some fluix dust, which is not terribly difficult either. Once placed down, it looks like you can either place it right on the edge of the energy cell. You'll note that it starts building up there, so the energy cell placed down can be placed right next to the vibration chamber. The other good thing to note is you want to make a Certus quartz wrench or a similar kind of wrench, and you'll want to right-click with that to pick it back up, and it'll store the energy it's already accumulated. If you break this guy with a drill or a hammer or anything like that, it's going to lose the energy it's stored, and it'll make the glass breaking sound. Pretty much anytime you hear that glass break sound, it means that you broke the item with the wrong tool. Okay, so we've got also fluix glass cable here. So this is basically your non-colored glass cable. There's a bunch of different types of cables actually. If we take a look here, we can see first off, there's all 16 colors are available, so you can get all the different kinds of colors for all kinds of different subnetworks. And there's other cables that we'll get into in just a moment. But the main deal here is that this cable will transport both energy, so you can use it to transport your power. We'll note here that the energy cell is once again filling up with energy, which is nice. And it'll also transport data, which we'll get to in just a bit. So now we've got our vibration chamber. We're generating energy, and we're storing it in an energy cell. Do note also that there's an upgraded version of the cell. This energy cell can store, it looks like 200,000 AE total. There's an upgraded version called the dense energy cell that can store 1.6 million AE. That guy is simply 8 energy cells around a calculation processor, something we'll get into taking a look at just a little bit. So let's go take a look at our little seeds here and see how much progress we've made. 5%, not bad. So we're actually doing pretty well. We almost have these guys grown. Now, one of the things you might want to know is how to make fluix crystals. If we look at NEI here, we'll see that you can transfer fluix crystals to fluix blocks, and you can get fluix dust from fluix crystals, but there's really no recipe for fluix crystals, or there's no starting point. Like, how do we get there? So basically, we're going to need to make ourselves a fluix crystal. How do we do that? Well, you're going to need to get some charged Certus quartz. So let's get one of those. Charged Certus quartz. Where are you at? There we are. Cool. And we're also going to need some nether quartz. And then finally we need some redstone dust. Okay, so these 3 items in the same puddle, 1, 2, 3, will eventually grow to form what we want. There we go. Cool. So by combining those 3, we've now got fluix crystal. Not nearly as long of a time frame as it takes to grow these guys. It's a lot quicker. But you'll see here that we've now got fluix crystal. So not too hard to make. We can try that one more time just to see how quick it is. So the quartz and the redstone. 1, 2, 3. And pretty quickly we should see a little bit of magic happening, and boom, we picked up some fluix crystals. Awesome. All right, so we've got power. We've got power storage. What can we do with all this stuff? Well, let's take a look at the most basic of Applied Energistics tools, the ME chest. Now, this block is actually interesting. There's 2 separate places that you can click on the block. If you click on the top of the block, you'll get that it can't read a storage cell. That's because you have to put a storage cell in it. The storage cell is placed in the bottom section of the block. Pretty cool. So what we do is I've gone ahead and crafted a 4K storage cell, which is one of the middle tier storage cells. There's actually 4 of them available. There's the 1, 4, 16, and 64. Now each of these types of storage cells can store 63 different types of items, which is exactly the same as it was in Applied Energistics 1. But the different sizes determine how many of those different types of items. So if you're going to have like a ton of cobblestone, you might want to throw it into a 64K storage cell, and that can store massive amounts of cobblestone and of any other 63 different types. But if you're going to have like a bunch of different bows that all have different damage values, like you're doing a mob farm, or if you're going to have a bunch of different, random items, you might want to only have a 1 or a 4K, because of course the higher in tier you get, the more expensive things get. Okay, and the 1K storage cells can be made with either pure Certus quartz or Certus quartz crystals, redstone, and the logic processor, which I'll show you how to make in a moment here. So let's go ahead and stick a 4K storage cell in the bottom section here, and you'll notice now that it is in fact lit up green, and the top of this block indicates that it is available to store items. So the ME storage chest can store items for us, which is pretty nice. Let's go ahead and drop some items in there. Cool, I'm throwing some sand in, and my fluix crystals, and some buckets, and the ME storage chest is storing everything that we want it to store. You can sort items by name or the number of items that you have. You can search for stuff in the top section here. There's some upgrade slots on the right, which I'll show you in a moment. You can also change the sort order, so if you want to sort from the different directions, so lowest number first versus highest number first, etc., etc. And then you can also integrate with NEI if you want. So if we open NEI back up, we can switch this to NEI synchronized mode, and now whenever we search for something, it'll synchronize with NEI. I think the versions are mismatched right now, so it might not work, but like I said, this is a beta, and so NEI is also in beta. It's only a release candidate right now, so I'm sure they'll integrate a little bit better. There's also this terminal style button here, which is new to Applied Energistics 2. It changes the way that the terminal style appears. So it's just a little bit different, tall versus smaller, and it's a pretty nifty gadget. Now what's really cool about Applied Energistics 2 is you no longer need to have an ME controller on a network that's just going to be small and basic. So in the past, if you want to do anything larger than what we've done now, you would need an ME controller to handle import buses, export buses, interfaces, and that kind of stuff. For now, you don't have to do that for smaller networks. And by smaller networks, I mean networks with less than 8 computational devices on it, so things like the ME chest. And in order to determine that, I'm going to introduce you guys to the concept of channels, which is a new mechanic in Applied Energistics 2, and is going to be pretty much fundamental to the way you build your ME networks. You're going to need to pay real close attention to the way channels work, because they're a little complicated, but once you understand them, you'll realize that they're both really powerful and really fun to mess with. Now, before we jump into this whole process of channels and everything, I did show you the recipe for the ME chest and the ME storage cells, and you'll note that they require different kinds of processors. Okay, so you need either a calculation processor or a logic processor. Let's take a look at how to make those, because that's a fundamental aspect of this mod. For that, we're going to need the inscriber, and we're going to have to hook it up to some kind of power system. So you remember those presses that I showed you inside the meteorite and told you they'd be important later? Well, now's later. So we need to go ahead and take a look at how we can use these. The inscriber is the block that will use some power from the AE system and some presses and some materials to make these processors. So the first thing we need to do if we want to make the logic processor is we have to find the logic engineering press. Cool, inscriber logic press, nice. That guy combines with gold. Ta-da, we've got a printed logic circuit. That's step one. We're also going to need the silicon press. This guy combines with silicon. Silicon is smelted Certus quartz or nether quartz, just like it was in Applied Energistics 1. Combine these two in the inscriber, and we'll get ourselves the printed silicon. Cool. Then all we have to do is combine the printed logic circuit with the printed silicon circuit and a piece of redstone in the middle. And what we'll get here, finally, is the logic processor. Not bad. So pretty easy process to go through, but you guys need to know how it works. Now, if we want to make the next tier processor, so if we want to make, for example, The Certus Quartz one, this one here, requires a calculation processor. This uses Certus Quartz, so this is kind of like the middle tier processor. In Applied Energistics 1, there was just level 1 and level 2, the gold and the diamond one. Now there's 3, gold, Certus Quartz, and then diamond. So let's take a look. So again, we're going to need the silicon, and we're going to need the, let's see, silicon press. There we go. Ta-da! And then we're also going to need to combine this with some Certus Quartz. So if we get ourselves the calculation press, we'll quickly discover that regular old Certus Quartz doesn't work. This is one of the very, very few recipes that actually requires pure Certus Quartz. Once we've got pure Certus Quartz, which we're currently growing in our pool over there, we'll have our printed calculation, and then we can go ahead and combine these two with some redstone, and what we should find is we've got that calculation processor. Cool. Speaking of that growing system, how's it going? Let's go check on them. 17%. Wow, that is slow. Let's speed it up. For this, we're going to need crystal growth accelerators. These guys are actually a little bit tricky to make. You need a full block of fluix crystal, and you're going to want to get a few of these, especially if you're planning to do a lot. What you can do is you can place one on either side, like so. So the more you place down, the faster this will go. However, these crystal growth accelerators use a lot of power, so we have to hook it up to our network. So let's go ahead and connect this power. Dun 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 dun. We'll see now that the device is online, and they're kind of glowing. So let's go ahead and drop our Certus Quartz crystal back in there, and we'll check on this in just a little bit, and we should see it's much quicker with these 4 crystal growth accelerators around it. Very cool. Let's see. We'll give it a moment here, and we'll see if we've gotten any growth. 51%. See what I mean about being a little bit faster? Yeah, you're definitely going to want to get yourself some crystal growth accelerators when you've got the opportunity. So you can see here these guys are definitely growing a lot faster. So all the time that I was doing the spotlight, we got to 17%. Within a few seconds, we got to 51%. Nice. Now we're up to 86%. Let's give this just a moment more and we'll see what happens. Wow, that is significantly faster with 4 accelerators on it. Oh, I think we just had a little bit of growth. Let's take a look. You'll note now that we've now got a higher tier Certus Quartz seed. If we take a look at NEI here, we'll see that there's actually several levels. There's the smallest. I think this looks like the middle tier. Then we're going to get up to a higher tier, and then we'll finally have the fully grown pure. So we'll leave that in there for a little bit, and we should come back shortly to see a fully grown one. Nice. Now, if you're interested to see how much power is being used, you can go ahead and create the network tool. This guy will tell you at an overall level how much power is currently stored, how much power is totally the max amount of power available, and how much energy usage there is. So currently, we're generating 10-ish AE per tick, and we're using 34 AE per tick. So a significant amount of power being used. Let's go ahead and click that guy off there, and we'll see now how much power are we using. 3, 2, very small amount of power now, right? So you'll note that it's a massive power drain to keep these 4 things running. So you're definitely going to want to look at either automating the turning off of these cables or whatever. And I think now we actually got up to pure Certus Quartz crystal. So that was pretty quick. We definitely quickly got the Certus Quartz crystal that we wanted. So these devices are now offline. Very cool. The dark cable, by the way, I'm not sure if that's back yet or not. So if you want, you can craft yourself the ME toggle bus. This is basically the dark cable of the past. But this is a little bit different. We're going to get into something new with this. These are the concept of parts. No longer is it just a cable. It's actually a part that you can attach to an existing cable, as we can see there. This is going to be used a little bit more shortly, but you'll see I just placed that part on that cable, and now I'll attach another piece of cable here, and we've got this guy connected. So we can see the device is online because he's receiving a redstone signal, and he won't be online when he's not receiving a redstone signal. So if we take a look here, we're only using 2 AE per tick. We flip on the lever, the device is now online, and if we take a look at this again, we'll see we're now up to 33 AE per tick. So this idea of a part, which we'll get into more in just a little bit in the spotlight, should be pretty cool to check out. There's more parts available that we'll be seeing shortly. And you should also note that there's an inverted toggle bus, which is kind of the opposite of the toggle bus, is it'll allow power through until it receives a redstone signal, just basically the opposite of the existing toggle bus. So the opposite redstone state determines whether or not power can go through. So before we get too much further into the spotlight, I want to remove this vibration chamber and show you guys how you can create or use other energy methods. For this, we're going to need an energy acceptor. This is the block that allows you to accept energy from other energy producing devices like industrial craft or build craft or thermal expansion. So just for the purposes of this spotlight, I'm going to throw a high voltage solar power on there so that we no longer have to worry about power, because what I'm about to show you is going to use up a lot of power, and I don't want power issues to get in the way, because I'm about to introduce you guys to channels, which I mentioned a little bit earlier. In order for me to really introduce you to channels, what I first need to do is explain to you the concept of data transfer information. So like in previous versions of Applied Energistics, data is transferred along these glass cables here. All right. Now, an ME network can transfer data over what's called channels, and each device that receives or sends data is going to use up a channel. So blocks like the energy acceptor and the energy cell and the inscriber, they don't actually send data back and forth, they're just using the power that's on the network. So that's not going to use a channel. We don't have to worry about channels for blocks like those. But blocks like the ME chest do use a channel. Something else that uses the channel is the ME terminal, which got a little bit of a facelift. It's really kind of neat. Now, in the new version of Applied Energistics 2, cables and all this other stuff are all multi-parts, including the ME terminal. The ME terminal is now a multi-part that gets attached to the glass cable. Pretty cool, right? So you can see here it's not taking up its own block space, and it's got pretty much the same functionality as the terminal that we're used to. So we can access the information in the ME chest via the terminal, because they're connected to the same cabling here. Cool. Now, this device here, the ME terminal, is using up a data channel, as is the ME chest. So we're currently using up 2 data channels on this entire network. Okay? An ME network without a controller can only use 8 channels. When you do have a controller, you can have significantly more. Let's take a look at what's going to happen is if we start using up more and more channels. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 more chests here. Well, 7 plus the 2 that we've already got hooked up is going to come out to equaling 9. Dun 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 dun. What's going to happen? Device missing channel. Uh-oh, our terminal is no longer working. That's a problem. We can't transfer the data. There's too much data on this network to transfer all at once. We're using up all 8 channels in our 8 chests, and the glass terminal here just isn't going to work for us. The chests are still receiving power, because really all they need is power in order for them to operate, but they're also using up the channels as well. So while the chests won't shut down, the network will. So we can't use this device terminal right here. If you'd like a visual representation of the number of channels you're using, that's really not too hard. Let's take a look at how we can do that using smart cables. These guys aren't too hard to get. You basically combine an existing covered cable with some redstone and glowstone. Covered cable, by the way, is made like this. Just like the other cable variants, there's 16 different colors, and the non-colored one is called fluix cable. So if we take a look at fluix, we'll see that there's the smart cable for fluix, the covered cable, and the glass cable, and the dense cable, which allows you to transfer more channels. Covered cable is just a piece of wool next to some of the glass cable, and that will cover it. And then you can get the smart cable, which is glowstone and redstone. Smart cable gives you a visual representation of the amount of channels that you're currently using. So let's go ahead and run some of this stuff. Dun dun dun. So when we remove this, we'll note here that we've got these 2 purple bands on these things. Okay. Now if we remove one of the channels, for example the ME terminal, it'll only have 1 purple band. Neat. Let's go ahead and remove some of these chests as well to help demonstrate this a little bit more. So we've got 1 purple band, and if we go ahead and run another cable into this, we've now got 2 of these bands. Okay? We've now got 3 of the purple bands. We've now got 4 purple bands. So we're using up 4 channels for the 4 chests. Once we apply the terminal, we'll now be using 5 bands. See that? Pretty cool, right? And then, of course, we can add more and more chests as necessary here. So let's go ahead and place down another one like so. And you'll note that even though it doesn't have a storage unit inside it yet, it's still using up one of the bands. There we go, 7. There we go, 8. We've now completed the maximum number of channels that we can have on an ME network without using a controller. If we throw down another chest, we'll get this little blackened out cable, which means, hey, there's something wrong. We can't communicate properly. We're missing device channels. We've overloaded our network. So you can really only have 8 devices on the same network. Other things that transfer and use these things are like the ME interface. So if we remove this guy, we're back down to 7. ME interface, plop that guy down. He's working with 8. If we were to grab another interface and throw him down, again, we're out of channels and we can't use the ME interface or the device terminal. Some of these things just won't work. Other ones include the import and export bus, and I'll show you guys how these things work in a little bit. Alright, so now that we've seen the limit, let's take a look at how we can break the limit, which is basically using the ME controller. The controller here is going to require one of those engineering processors, which, as you can guess, is similar to the processing we did earlier, but we're going to have to use a diamond and the engineering press. Let's go ahead and make an ME controller. This guy is not too hard to use. Simply place him down. What I'm probably going to do here is replace the energy cell that's been the hub of my network here. So let's pick him up. And remember, he's going to store his energy just fine. So we can see here, energy cell, fully charged. I'm just going to place him right there. And then I'm going to place down my ME controller. Dun 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 dun, shiny. So that guy is now the brain of your network. The way this thing works is pretty simple. Basically, each side of this ME controller can output to 32 different channels. So what I'm going to do here is actually change my wiring just a little bit to be nice and efficient. And I'm going to run the power lines underneath here like so. There we go. So now, when we want to connect our channels to our ME controller, it's pretty straightforward. We simply have to do that. Ta-da! And now we've got a network that's capable of handling multiple channels. Very cool. However, we've come to a problem. Glass cables and smart cables and covered cables, these 3 blocks can only transmit 8 channels themselves as well. So in order for us to take advantage of the full 32 capability of the ME controller, we're going to have to use a dense cable. Dun dun dun. The dense cable here, as you can see, is just 4 pieces of normal covered cable with some of that redstone and glowstone combined. And what you can do here is use the dense cable to transmit 32 separate channels all in one line. Let's take a look at how we can use this to kind of set up a couple different kinds of power. I'm going to have to rearrange this system a little bit. So for demonstration purposes, I've got one long, dense cable line going all the way across here, as you can see. And I've even hooked up one networked channel here to the crafting terminal, which is online and working just fine. I've also got some smart cables running down in lines. So this is just a basic demonstration of how this works. When you place down a chest, that chest is going to use up one of the channels on the smart line, and it's also going to use up one of the channels on the dense line. However, you can't see it at the moment. Let's go ahead and add a few more chests. So we can see here that we're adding more and more. And we're using up more and more channels. And if we look along the line here, we can see how many channels are being used all the way across the line. There we go. And we'll note now that we've maxed it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Note how this line isn't actually using up a channel. That's because there's no channels available further down the line for it to work. So the limit you can still have on smart cables is still 8. However, the dense cable can obviously support more. We're only using a little bit of the network bandwidth on the dense cable here. We can see we're only using up 2 of the lines. So that's, out of the total 32, we're using 8 at the moment. Okay? And this guy's using just 1. Now, if we add some chests here, we'll see the same thing happening. There we go. So same deal. These 8 chests that are on the front there max out the cable right here, but we'll also note that over here, it's not able to connect. Cool. And we're also seeing how much of the cable's bandwidth we're using here. So we're only using 2 channels along this line, but up to where the control is, we're using all 4 cable channels, as you can see there. Now, of course, as you guys probably know, you don't actually have to run all these cables underneath here. This was just to demonstrate to you guys how it works. These different chests can communicate with each other over the same cable. So if we were to place a cable here, we should see all 8 lines light up because these ME chests will all communicate to each other without being connected to individual cables. Pretty cool. Now, this is pretty much one of a couple different ways that you can actually get a little bit smart about your channel management, and it's actually a pretty neat and fun way to mess around with it and think about complex ways that you have to run your wiring and cabling and all that cool stuff. It's a lot of fun to kind of mess around and figure out a nice, efficient way to build your AE system now that you have to keep the concept of channels in mind. The other thing about the ME controller, like I said earlier, it does use 32 channels per side is what it provides, so you can't have more than 32 devices on the same side, so you're going to have to start connecting to other sides as well here. And of course, you've got your different covered and colored cables here, so if we take a look at the cables, you can see all 16 colors are available. So if you want to have some red cabling going out another side that actually connects up into some other stuff, you're more than welcome to set that up. Pretty neat, right? Now, the final thing to note is that if you do find yourself in a situation where you need more than 32 times 6 different devices on the same ME network, the ME controller is a multi-block structure, and you can build it out just like so. So you can actually build it up and make it a nice little multi-block. I think the limit is 7 by 7 by 7. So, I mean, at that point, you've got a ridiculously large network, and you're not going to, I mean, if you guys manage to max that out, then, you know, you're just going to have to build another AE system, I guess. But yeah, so the multi-block of the ME controller is pretty cool to mess with. And with that, guys, I think what I'm going to do is wrap up this part of the Spotlight now. So part 1 of the Spotlight has mostly covered what's new between ME1 and ME2, or AE1 and AE2. What we're going to do is come back next episode and check out part 2, which will cover a couple more new things, and then some of the old stuff that you guys are pretty familiar with. So like I said, I'm trying to treat this Spotlight as if it were new to, like a new mod, because a lot of the functionality is new, and I'm pretty sure at some point in the future, people are going to come here to see this Spotlight to figure out how to use Applied Energistics, and they've never used Applied Energistics number 1. So I want to make sure that this Spotlight makes sense to them as much as it makes sense to the people who have used Applied Energistics 1 for quite a long time. So for now, this is Direwolf20 signing off. Come back for part 2. There's more new stuff to see, and there's some pretty old stuff that we're used to seeing that we're going to see. Some of it's got an interesting facelift, though, so you're definitely going to want to check it out. All right, guys, take it easy.